What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Big Blue Avenue. I'm your host, Tom Scavetta, joined alongside my co-host, Sam Cardona. Sam, it was a rough Monday night. Have you recovered? How are you doing? What's going through your head? Hello.
Hello. I feel like every week you ask me this, and every week I say, physically I'm fine. Mentally, not okay. This was another rough week. It was not an ideal situation in prime time. I mean, it's these prime time games that are really stressing me out. The fact that everybody is watching them and they're not good football games, and it's and of course, like that big giant Cardinals comeback, which is our best game this year so far. That's in a 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock slot or whatever it was. So it's been a little bit rough, but we're here for another therapy session this week, so we'll make it through.
Yeah, very similar to week one. Just to briefly recap here, the Giants, abysmal performance. They got wrecked by the Seahawks, 24-3 Monday Night Football. Possibly, Sam, the worst offensive line performance in franchise history, really missing Andrew Thomas and John Michael Schmitz, who left the game early with an injury. People calling for Bobby Johnson's head. No Saquon Barkley. They made him and them and Daniel Jones made Devon Witherspoon look like an all-pro, even though he is likely on his way. But they could have minimized his individual damage. We saw Dable furious with DJ. Just before we bring up Doug here, a couple quick hits. This was bad. This was really bad. And you were saying before we went live that you actually started watching YouTube during the game. This game lost your attention.
Literally. It literally did. I had the TV on in front of me and I had my computer next to me, and I was like, I'm not even interested in watching this game right now because I didn't see any sort of fire. I didn't see any sort of light that there could be a comeback or anything like that. It just looked bad. So I sat in front of my TV, but I barely watched the game like post third quarter. Basically all the fourth quarter I did not pay attention to. So it was just not entertaining. That's the thing too. It's like when it's in these primetime slots, you at least want a good game, even if they lose. But they're not. They're just not entertaining.
I don't blame you at all for sitting out the second half, however long it was. But quickly here, folks, if you want to check out more of our content, we are on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Big Blue Avenue. We appreciate everyone's support. And of course, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where the majority of our content comes out. Let's introduce our guest of the evening from GMEN HQ, Doug Rush. Doug, thank you so much for joining us.
We got him.
How's it going, my friend?
I'm doing good. I was this camera situation. It worked, and then all of a sudden it didn't work. It's kind of like the Giants defense almost. Like it worked, it didn't work, and then now slowly working. But yeah, no, glad to be joining you guys.
No, thank you so much. We're excited to have you. I've seen some of your content in the past, and I like what you tweet out sometimes. So I figured, let me see if I can get Doug on. I'd like to talk with him and pick his brain a little bit. But before we dive, obviously you caught us in talking about Daniel Jones. But before we discuss that, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your work, what you do regarding New York Giants football?
Sure. So I've been covering the Giants since 2009. I've been around Bleacher Report, USA Today. Wrote for this little company called Sports Media 101. I've been covering the Giants primarily. So let's see, 14 years now of the 19 that I've been a sports writer. So I'm around. I still like to, put not so much pen to paper anymore. It's more like everything's digital now. So just kind of still like to write, and everything's social media based. But yeah, it's always. I took a year off of writing to, when my daughter was born. So, but I feel good to get back into writing, and I always enjoy interacting with everybody and talking Giants football. And even through the bad seasons, it's always good to talk about football and, talk football with fine folks like you guys. So
Thank you.
Love that.
We appreciate
Lovely
that.
stuff. Sam, why don't you get started here? We have a lot to get into. Want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, because I'm so stumped.
We will start with last week. Tom and I were just discussing Daniel Jones's performance and everything like that. So why don't we just kind of take a broad stab here and just say what were your biggest takeaways from the Seattle game? Seeing this game, seeing the poor performance basically in all aspects and in every way with this team. What was the biggest takeaway that you took from it?
So the Giants were basically in a must-win situation at 1-2, with two very, very difficult games coming up, going to Miami and then at Buffalo, another primetime game. And without Saquon Barkley, without Andrew Thomas, basically two of the most key people on the offense, not named the quarterback. And I wanted to see if Daniel Jones, the $160 million quarterback, because now that's going to be attached to him because you got the big boy contract. You got the quarterback contract. You have to play like that person who deserves that contract. And especially since a lot of the fan base doesn't still believe that he's that guy. And I wanted to see if he could lead this team in a very difficult scenario on prime time against a very stingy Seahawks team that was bringing the house every single play. And unfortunately, I saw a lot of the same mistakes that we saw of Daniel Jones back in year 1 and 2 and 3 when he was making, especially under, Joe Judge and Jason Garrett, and I mentioned it all the last 48 hours, staring down receivers. And even Devin Weatherspoon mentioned it, and that was something they scouted, that he stares down the first target. And if you notice on the pick 6, he was staring down Paris Campbell. And I think year 1 and year 2, you understand that. A rookie making this, not year 5 for a guy who's supposed to be making $40-50 million a season. That's not exactly something that you want to see from a guy that you want to impose your confidence in. Missing reads, missing receivers. He missed Wan'Dale Robinson several times. I mean, Wan'Dale was even jumping up and down saying, I'm open, and he threw it away on 3rd 11. And then obviously the pick 6, he had Darren Waller wide open. And instead of trying to jam the ball into Paris Campbell, and maybe he gets tackled at the 1, he gets picked off. Whereas if he had thrown the ball back into the end zone where Darren Waller had nobody on him, okay, maybe Darren Waller misses it and it's an incomplete, but it's not going to be a pick 6. At most, it's a touchdown. That was the dagger of the game because at that point, it was still 14-3, and it was still a ball game. 14-10 would have put the Giants right back into it. They could have fought in the fourth quarter. We could have had a decent Monday Night Football game. Instead, you go to 20-3, and that was the game because the Giants weren't scoring. They were getting blitzed all game. They were getting pressured all game. And that was kind of like the air just got taken right out of the stadium. And that pick 6, that was it. Because then the Giants had nothing left. People started to leave. People started to turn off the game. That was it. And that's like, it was like the most deflating feeling watching that because you wanted to see, and Daniel Jones, the play before, he got the first down scrambling on the 3rd down. Like, it's like, all right, the Giants are going to I felt like the Giants are going to score on this play, on this drive, and actually give the fan base something to cheer about because they've just been waiting and they've been booing and they've just been sick of watching a bad football team for most of the game. And then all of a sudden it's like you get this drive going. It's like, okay, they're going to score. They're going to do something. They're going to show some fight and get into it. And then the pick 6, and then that was it. And that was the game.
Right. Obviously a terrible performance for Daniel Jones. And I mean, by the way, Sam and I are huge Daniel Jones supporters, defenders, but we cannot defend what we saw on Monday night. We defended him after Dallas. We can't defend him after Seattle. We just can't. It was bad. San Francisco wasn't good either. Arizona was okay. It was great in the second half, but quite frankly, it's a big problem, Doug. It's huge. I won't say he's the biggest issue, but quite frankly, he's a part of the issue and a significant part of the issue because, like you said, year 5, you can't be making those mistakes. And Sam, I think, we were really high on him, especially after last season. And it seems like not just him, though, the whole team has just regressed. The whole team has just regressed. And it's very, very concerning. And, we're talking about takeaways from Seattle. What is there to take away? The team sucks. Like, what else is there to talk about? Doug, I mean, we'll start with you here on this one. Is there any takeaway from this game and from the first 4 games of this season why the team has regressed?
I mean, the feeling afterwards was, and I kind of get because I like to check social media. I like to check the vibe of the fan base, and it feels like we've gone back to 2017 to 2021 when the Giants weren't winning many games, and all of a sudden we're talking about the possibility of draft picks and the NFL draft, and I hated talking about the NFL draft, but yet here we are, early October, and we're talking about possibility of Giants placement. By the way, they'd be picking 10th today if the season ended. When I was with USA Today, that was my weekly thing because the Giants were so bad and I felt like they were eliminated early in the season. So it was covering what place the Giants would be picking in the draft if the season ended today. And it was so, like, you want to call it demoralizing, if you want to call it like just frustrating, but at the same time, like, I felt like I was tracking the draft because the Giants weren't looking for a draft pick or they weren't looking for a playoff appearance until last season. And that was like, it was a breath of fresh air. And now I feel like we've just gone backwards. And it just feels like, I don't know if they got too comfortable with making the playoffs, winning a playoff game. And I felt like after, winning 9 games in the postseason, winning a playoff game, it's like you're supposed to take the next step as a young franchise who I felt like actually started to figure out how to win football games, winning against Tennessee, winning against Carolina, the Green Bay game in London, Baltimore, the Jacksonville game where they hung on by the goal line. Like, these are games that they would have lost in the previous years under Joe Judge. And I thought with Brian Dable, like, they're figuring out how to finish and win. And I feel like it's gone like a complete 180, and it's like back to the same stuff we used to see during the losing times. And I don't know if they got too comfortable. They believe their own hype. It's hard because we saw some fight in the Arizona game. We saw, they have the talent to score and to stop people in the Arizona game. And, people are saying, but it was only the Cardinals. The Cardinals beat the freaking Dallas Cowboys. And it's like, it's kind of like, stop knocking the Cardinals because the Cardinals have a lot of fight. They have some talent on there. Joshua Dobbs, like, okay, he's not Patrick Mahomes, but that guy fights and that guy plays his guts out every single game. Like, they're a scrappy young team, and the Giants, they had their throats being pressed on in the first half, and they had to show that they could beat the Cardinals in the second half, and they scored 31 points in the second half, and they showed that they can fight. And then they kind of got backed into a corner with San Francisco. Nobody thought they were going to beat San Francisco on 4 days rest without Saquon Barkley after the fight that they put up against Arizona. And okay, that game was what it was. We all saw that game for what it was back in April when they put them on 4 days rest again on a Thursday night game. Understood. But this game here against Seattle was kind of like, it was kind of like the pulse test. Like, do you guys want to, save your season, get to 2-2, actually show the fans that you guys want to be a potential playoff team again? And, it's just felt like the magic that everything had from last year when they were 3-1, going to London, won that one, got to 4-1, 5-1, 6-1, looked like this just out of nowhere team that had fight and was just revitalizing the entire fan base. It's like all of a sudden it's like gone, and it looks like back to where Joe Judge was coaching the team, and just looked like they had no desire at times. And I maybe they'll go to Miami. Maybe if Saquon returns, he looked like he was okay at practice. Maybe with Saquon returning, they'll get some of that fight back. But right now, I don't know if it's because without Barkley, without Andrew Thomas, and just guys aren't stepping up when needed. And right now, the Giants look like a very lost football team that is headed towards the top 5 of the draft, as opposed to trying to fight for a playoff spot again.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I keep saying that about the Cardinals as well. Like, I don't think that the Cardinals are as bad of a team as people are expressing them to be. I mean, I want them to go into, I think they're playing the Bengals this weekend. I took the Cardinals. The Bengals have been looking horrible. So I agree, especially after they just beat the Cowboys. And it's just all around. Andrew Thomas, I feel like, is such a vital part of this team as a whole, that without him there, like, the fact that we could put 31 points up, that's a huge deal for us. We have struggled so much throughout this year and last year and the year before, but just putting up points. Like, I feel like when we've done this show in the past, Tom, I feel like my keys to the game have been like, get in the end zone, which is just like, yeah, obviously. So the fact that I know we can do it, that's where that little bit of faith and that little bit of hope has been lying for me. And I do want to ask you, because Tom was mentioning, how we feel about Daniel Jones, and throughout this season, we saw him with that comeback win and that fire in him as a quarterback. But like right now, where are you standing on Daniel Jones, and were you ever thinking like, this is the guy, this is the guy who's going to bring our team back into the playoffs, and with all this money and everything that we're paying him? What are your thoughts on Daniel Jones as a whole right now?
I've been back and forth on him throughout his career. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I was very inspired by him as a rookie who, he made his mistakes, but at the same time, he threw 24 touchdown passes. And, when he debuted, he started out 2-0. And he gave the Giants fan base a lot of confidence that he could potentially be this guy and learn under Eli Manning. And then they made the worst mistake possible in bringing Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator for him. And it's all that work that Pat Shurmur did in year one just got undone. And the thing that concerned me early on with Daniel Jones was the mistakes he made, the turnovers, things I've been mentioning, in year 5 early on, staring down receivers, not making the proper reads, holding onto the football a little too long until we got to 2022. And I feel like Brian Dable and Mike Kafka kind of like had to put him back in the lab and undo all the mistakes that, Joe Judge and Jason Garrett made. And, even though he threw 15 touchdowns, he also rushed for 7, and he was also missing 4 of his top wide receivers that he was expected to have in week 1. Kenny Golladay was a ghost. Kadarius Toney was hurt and then traded. Sterling Shepard was out by week 3, and Wan'Dale was out before Thanksgiving. And yet they made it work with Darius Slayton. They made it work with Isaiah Hodgins. Daniel Bellinger came back from the eye injury. And Saquon was tremendous the entire season. Like, they had this makeshift offense that they had to come up with. And yeah, he threw 15 touchdowns. But guess what? The Giants won a lot of games, and a lot of games that normally they wouldn't win in the past. And people tell me, yeah, they started to wear it down. But they also won a lot of games when it counted the most. Like in Washington on a Sunday night, they beat Indianapolis. And then they almost beat Minnesota on Christmas Eve, but then they went and beat Minnesota back in the playoffs, which was tremendous. And that's when Daniel Jones had a 300-yard game, a couple touchdowns, and won the Giants' first playoff game since they won the Super Bowl, back in 2012. Like, these are things that some quarterbacks don't ever get to experience. And Daniel Jones did that. And I thought, okay, maybe he's finally figured it out. Maybe Brian Dable has finally unlocked everything that, that they first saw him in 2019. And maybe they're going to finally, and I was okay with the contract. I always felt he was going to get a little less. I was okay with the numbers because of the way they constructed the contract, because it was less on year 1, because it allowed the Giants the flexibility to sign other players. And then it got to year 2 and year 3, the cap number goes up. But I'm thinking, if Daniel Jones' performance improves, then it's not a big deal because it's a bargain contract for the way it's structured. But now we're starting to see the mistakes again. And that's really concerning. Like, can these things be fixed? And, if Brian Dable can't and Mike Kafka can't fix these things, at the same time, the Giants set themselves up with the contract being the way it is, where after 2024, if they decide that they want to look at another quarterback in the draft, I'm not going to blame them, because they also inherited Daniel Jones. If they want to look at their own guy and they're picking in the top 5 or even the top 10, I will not blame the Giants if they decide to draft somebody, put Daniel Jones on notice, and it's like, hey, look, thanks, we gave you a contract, but at the same time, you kind of also didn't live up to it, and we kind of want to go to our own guy. That's kind of the nature of the NFL business, and the Giants set it up with 2 outs, and if they have to use the first out, that's so be it. That's the business side of it, and unfortunately, Daniel Jones is the one to blame, because granted, yes, he's been stuck with the worst offensive line in football, and they've been ranked last for the last 4 weeks. At the same time, it's been shown the offensive line isn't everything to blame. The interceptions, some of them, yes, have bounced off receivers, Some have also been on Daniel Jones himself, like trying to force the ball on week 1 in Dallas. Should have just ran out of bounds. That you would have kept the ball, would not have been picked off. And then in Seattle, the pick 6 was brutal. And then he throws instead of checking off to his running back, he gets hit and the ball sails into the air and right into Quadri Diggs. Like, those are mistakes we used to see from Daniel Jones back in 2019, 2020 when he was younger. Not when you're in year 5 and just. I like Daniel Jones. I mean, he has not complained one single time since he's been here. I think he has had the right mentality. At the same time, it's hard to be the guy playing after Eli Manning. And sometimes, maybe it just doesn't work out. Maybe Daniel Jones needs to go to a lower market where the pressure's not on, the New York media is not on him. And maybe just, I felt this after 2020, going into 2022, if the Giants decide to cut ties, maybe Daniel Jones just needs to go somewhere else, get a fresh start, and maybe he'll perform well. I know there will be plenty of people out there looking for a starting quarterback with experience who can go out there. And actually after the game, Atlanta was mentioned, that Atlanta should start sniffing around Daniel Jones because of Desmond Ridder. And I'm like, that wouldn't be a bad place for him. And that's whether that happens or not remains to be seen. But I'm starting to think that Daniel Jones right now is the bridge quarterback as opposed to being the long-term franchise quarterback. If the season goes the way it is, unfortunately, I can see, and if the Giants are picking the top 10, I can totally see the Giants picking another quarterback, and it'll be on to the next guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, we have a comment from a Falcons fan right on cue saying he would take him in a heartbeat. Noah Dibler from Georgia, big Atlanta Falcons fan. He likes Daniel Jones too. And, we'll move on to the next question here. I just want to say one last thing, guys. If you're watching and you're a big Daniel Jones supporter, Daniel Jones is not garbage. That's not what we're saying. And both of you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but he's not going to be a guy that can take you over the top. He needs a good supporting cast around him to be a fringe top 10 quarterback if he's ever going to get there. I thought he was awfully close, but right now we'll have to see. I mean, Doug, I hope you're wrong, but right now you're looking right on. Yeah. Obviously, I think we all hope that we're wrong, but it'll, left to be seen. And that kind of leads me to ask you about the next domino. As far as the offensive line, is it more the coaching or is it more the play? Because obviously we've seen Andrew Thomas is hurt. We saw John Michael Schmitz go down early. I would argue that Schmitz might be their second best lineman already behind Andrew Thomas. I think him and Ben. I mean, Ben's not a good center, but he's an average guard, I would say. It's really tough for me. I mean, they held the ball for 36 minutes and turned it over 3 times. It really irks me to say that, whether it's Azudu, I never liked the Azudu draft pick. It was bad. I did not like that pick off the film that I saw in college. I like McKeithen more than Azudu, but something's starting to say to me, if they pick high and Joe Alt is there at 8 to 10, I saw your shirt, so I don't know if you're a Notre Dame fan or not, but I am. I'm taking Joe Alt. I'm replacing Evan Neal with him. I would love that, but
just to show you, this is actually
here on the O line, because I mean
this is actually a New York Giants shirt in green. This is a St. Patty's Day shirt, so
very nice.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think John Michael Schmitz is the second best lineman on the team. And if you look at what they've been trying to put out there after week 1 and with Andrew Thomas out, Azudu he played a handful of games, and you really don't know if he's a guard or a tackle. He's been playing all over, and I think he's started now like 4 or 5 games. He's a young player. John Michael Schmitz, he's playing in his very, very first professional games, and he's hurt now. And it's not clear if he's going to play on Sunday, which Ben Bredeson would probably be the center again. Marcus McKeithen. So before the Seattle game, Marcus McKeithen was slated to start again at right guard. I think it shows the Giants view McKeithen as a starter more than they do Azudu. And I think they want to try McKeithen, who, by the way, lost his entire rookie season to a torn ACL. So this season is basically his rookie year. He's playing his very, very first professional games as well. And then you have Evan Neal, who got, a year's worth of experience last year, and he's still very young, and he's still learning. And some, including myself, he might not be a right tackle. He might need to move inside to maybe right guard or left guard, just kind of like what, Eric Flowers did and Robert Gallery and so many others of the past, Justin Pugh, who also did it as well, going from tackle to guard. It's not uncommon for these big, tall guys who they can't grasp the speedier edge rushers, and they have to move inside because they're big, they're strong, and they can take on, the defensive tackles as opposed to trying to stop the edge rushers. And right now, Evan Neal looks kind of lost at right tackle, and I would almost think maybe moving him inside could help him. I don't know if that's a coaching thing. A lot of people have been very down on Bobby Johnson, who came over with Brian Zabel from Buffalo. I've said if they decide to make a move and decide to let Bobby Johnson go, there's a guy out there named Mike Munchak, who was a long-time, he's a Hall of Famer, long-time offensive line coach for the Titans. I was a head coach for 3 years, didn't work out. And then he went to Pittsburgh and turned their line around. And he was with the Broncos and did okay, but he got fired with Vic Fangio's staff. So that's a guy who I would immediately call, because that guy does wonders with offensive lines. Because the other guy I would love to have here is Bill Callahan with the Cleveland Browns, who the Giants wanted to talk to, but once Jason Garrett took over and Jason Garrett stripped Bill Callahan of his play calling duties when they were together in Dallas, Bill Callahan decided to go to Cleveland. So that wasn't happening. Bill Callahan could have done wonders for the Giants offensive line, and I feel like they missed out on that, but that is what it is. But I don't know if Bobby Johnson is the right guy for this current staff, because it's a lot of young, inexperienced players, minus Andrew Thomas, and Mark Lewinsky's still here, but he's not going to be here next year. It's it's almost a $5 million pay savings to cut him. And I feel like it's just this makeshift offensive line with young players, inexperienced players, and at times really not good players. And when you're trying to put somebody in like Daniel Jones, and you're correct, he's a good player, but he's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Josh Allen. He's not even Eli Manning. He's not going to just rise everybody up. Like, he needs good supporting cast around him. And that's what they tried, bringing Saquon back. Having Saquon was a very vital thing. If you notice, the minute they signed him to that contract, Saquon got tagged. Saquon is a very essential part of Daniel Jones. That you're talking about a top 5, even top 3 running back in the league who can catch passes, who can do things that a lot of other backs can't do. Having him part of the offense is key. They went and traded for Darren Waller, who was once a 1,000-yard receiver as a tight end. They went and traded up and drafted Jalen Hyatt, who could burn it down the field. And then that's another thing. They're not even targeting Jalen Hyatt, who's got all this speed, who almost had 100 yards in week 2 and was burning the Cardinals. And then in week 3, he's not even being targeted. That baffles me. Like, just if the running game's not working, and if you need to start doing some quick throws, throw it deep to freaking Hyatt. Go get him. I mean, they started to get Wan'Dale back into the mix, and that's good. But then at the same time, Daniel Jones is also missing Wan'Dale wide open. And he's throwing the ball away when Wan'Dale, granted, he's 5'8". Sometimes he's hard to see, but still, you got a wide open guy, and you're completely missing him. Maybe because, and granted, maybe you're running out of, pressure, and you've had to change the play on the fly, but at the same time, Wan'Dale is one of your targets, a speedy target, and you're missing him. And it's just, it's frustrating a lot of the fan base. It's frustrating to everybody. And I'm sure, you've seen Brian Dable throwing tablets, and he's, yelling at him on the sideline. It's frustrating to watch a guy that everybody thought was going to be the guy who got this big contract. And it's like, almost like everything is going backwards in regression. And it could be the unfortunate story of, oh, here's a guy that could have been the guy, but then just wasn't the guy, and then you're looking on to the next guy. So,
right,
definitely. It's there's a lot of different things, especially with the offense specifically, that are wrong that could be right in any other team. Like, I feel like every time we try to bring somebody on, like Darren Waller, Kenny Golladay, like they just kind of fall apart on this team. But let's go to the other side of the ball for a moment here and just talk about defensively, because they are the stronger part of the team. I do think that the defense has been performing, fairly well. Could be a lot worse on that side of the ball. But out of everybody, because we do have a lot of different stars and people who could perform extremely well, who has impressed you most this season on the defensive side of the ball?
Who's impressed me the most? Isaiah Simmons so far has,
Yeah.
I think he needs to play more, but he's
Yeah.
looked pretty good when he's played. Thibodeau, for the first 2 games, looked like a ghost. And then, I don't know, something got lit under him. The last 2 games, he's looked like the guy we saw last year. He's had 3 sacks in the last 2 games. He's had, I believe, 8 or 9 pressures. He's been getting after, and I think it started with the San Francisco game. He was getting after Brock Purdy. And it's just Brock Purdy had Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle waiting for those little dump-off passes. And then the Giants, those guys are hard to stop. And just that was what it was. But, Thibodeau in a game where I felt like a lot of people kind of struggled a bit to get pressure on Geno and at times, Drew Lock. Thibodeau was around all, the entire game. And for the ghost that Aziz was, and granted he was hurt too, but Aziz actually looked like, he was getting back into rhythm. He was pressuring all game. He had at least 5 of them. He not quite getting to the quarterback yet, but get the pressure on, and eventually the sacks will come. If you continue to bring the heat, and with Wink Martindale's defense, that's all part of it, is bring the pressure and force the offense to make things happen. Dexter Lawrence, even though the numbers might not say it, Dexter Lawrence continues to be a rock in the middle, and he's absolutely deserving of that contract he got, because being a defensive tackle, you're not always going to get the gaudy numbers that the edge rushers tend to get with sacks and everything, but that guy brings pressure every single day, and he's always got that blue collar hard hat mindset. Just will bring the force every single game. He's been the one, because he got the contract over the summer, and he continues to be the guy, just that rock in the middle. There has never been a question of whether or not he deserved that deal, because he does. He got paid, and he deserves to get paid, and he just continues to be one of the few that has really just in a year where sometimes the defense has had, they wear down as they've been on the field, especially the San Francisco game. Dexter Lawrence hasn't worn down and hasn't looked like somebody who, we have to question whether he gets paid or not. Dexter Lawrence is probably top 5, interior lineman in the sport for a reason. So yeah, that's probably the guy who I'm most impressed with, because he got paid and he continues to deserve, like the guy, like we call it playing like the back of your football card. He's playing like it. He's continuing to play like an all-star, a Pro Bowl, or whatever you want to call it these days. That's the one who I think I'd be the most impressed with, because he's living up to the expectations and to the contract.
Right. That's a good pick. For me, I'm going with, Sam and I do this every week, our New York Giants Defensive Player of the Week. This is the player that's really stuck out to me. And Sam, I'll let you roll through this quick here.
Yeah.
Going with Kayvon Thibodeau for me, because of the pass rushing. I think outside of Dexter Lawrence right now, he is the second best player on our defensive front. But I will say I expected Dexter to be this good. For me, Kayvon is beginning to take that step forward in year number 2, Sam. Or
Yep.
Kayvon, I should say.
Yeah, definitely. So our player of the week, as Tom said, 2 sacks, 1 PBU, which means that he's had 3 sacks so far this season. And in the last 2 games, this is the first multi-sack game of his career, which is, wish that it would happen a little bit more often. 2023, he's had 9 tackles, 3 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hurries, and 1 pass defended in the last 4 games. And he's played 84% of the snaps this season. And so seeing at least a little bit of goodness come out of this past Monday night game.
And
awesome.
We also forgot, he was within inches of a potential pick 6.
It's true.
You're right.
That's the thing that everybody forgets is, and I don't blame him too, because it's just the ball kind of got thrown at him, and he obviously he wasn't ready for it. But
right.
If he catches that he's gone for 6, and
of course, yeah.
And that was just part of him being, a lot of people were down on him the first 2 games because he didn't have good games, and also he got dropped into coverage a lot too. And everybody always just focuses on sack numbers for pass rushers. And you have to remind, like, Justin Tuck he didn't start out this like a Micah Parsons. Michael Strahan didn't start out like Michael Strahan either. Like, sometimes these guys take a little bit to come around. And also last year, Kayvon Thibodeau missed the first couple games of the season with an injury over the summer. So like his first game was that Monday night game in Dallas. And some of these, like, they take time to and as a young pass rusher, I don't know if you saw it last year, like Kayvon Thibodeau got held every single game didn't get any special treatment and whatnot. And I mean, it looked like at times like Kayvon Thibodeau was like getting headlocked by these offensive linemen. Like, he was bringing pressure the entire season. It's just you only see the 4 sacks, and that's not always how edge rushers like make their impact. Like, Kayvon Thibodeau was a force all last season, and he got off to the slow start. But then I noticed in San Francisco, he was all up in Brock Purdy's face every single. It's just Purdy was great at getting the ball off very quickly, and he had Christian McCaffrey there, and Christian McCaffrey is just one of the best in the league at making things happen. Having Deebo Samuel, having George Kittle, if not for those guys, Thibodeau would have had a couple more sacks. It's just Brock Purdy was ready, and he knew how to get the ball off quickly. And then, Geno Smith, he's a little bit elusive, but at the same time, Thibodeau got to him twice, and he really was the only one. And Thibodeau, again, brought a lot of pressure. Same thing with Aziz. It's just, it's coming for Thibodeau, and I think he'll be heading, be hunting for Tua on Sunday, and I think slowly the guy we all expected with the 5th overall pick and to be one of those top pass rushers is finally evolving into the player that everybody's expected.
Right. And Sam, before we get to you here, I just want to say one thing too to back up Doug's point. Yeah, Geno Smith didn't look great on Monday night. He got hurt. He was okay. He was upset at Isaiah Simmons. It was just an unfortunate bounce or unfortunate fall, in my opinion. But it was a tough break. I mean, I thought the defense was okay. Banks gave up the touchdown to Metcalf. Thibodeau was really coming on. But it just continues. The missed tackling really irks me as well. I'm sure you guys agree. Bobby Okereke, that scary first tackle of the game where Walker had that touchdown run that was called back. Very, very lucky. And then there was a few tackles missed on special teams as well. Outside of Gano, the special teams is atrocious this year. The Seahawks were begging. I mean, they were begging the Giants to take control of this game. Begging them, and they just couldn't do it. So this loss should be taken personally. And I guess as we now get into week 5, Giants bring back Justin Pugh, who all of us know, our 2013 first-round draft pick.
The season is saved.
The season is saved. One of many guys that have been on this offensive line when it struggled. This likely has something to do with maybe JMS's status for week 5. I doubt he plays. Unfortunately, Pugh himself coming off the torn ACL. I don't expect Pugh to be ready for Miami, maybe Buffalo, but I'm happy he's back, and hopefully he can knock some sense into players like Evan Neal, who, guys, I don't know if you saw it today. I'm sure everyone did at this point, but very harsh on his critics, quoting the following. Says the fans who criticize likely flip hot dogs and hamburgers somewhere. Also stated that some of the Giants are fair weather and bandwagons for booing the team when things aren't going well. It also quoted, "Why would a lion concern himself with the opinion of a sheep?" referring to fans such as us or, people who are critiquing him. So, I mean, my thoughts are, Evan Neal just posted an apology 10 minutes ago. I don't know if you guys saw it, but it just came out. I can read it to you guys quick in case this is the first time you're seeing this. Neal said 10 minutes ago on his Twitter account, "I am wrong for lashing out at the fans who are just as passionate and frustrated as I am. I let my frustrations in my play, plus desire to win, get the best of me. I had no right to make light of anyone's job, and I deeply regret the things I said. We are working day in and day out to grow as a team, and this was an unnecessary distraction. I apologize. Thoughts, anybody? Again, I think it was a bad thing to do, but at least he apologized and admitted that much more we can do. I'm not going to hold this against him long term.
I definitely think that I get that people, players get upset when fans start saying a lot of stupid stuff, like they'll come out and say crazy things all the time, but I get he's frustrated and everything, but this not really something that you should be saying. In my opinion, talking about flipping hot dogs and hamburgers, this is a little bit, it might cut a little bit too close to home for some people. Like that's just like I think it's a little just too rough. But overall, I'm glad that he issued an apology. I'm sure some PR person was like, Evan, come on, don't say things like that. But it's not like unprecedented. Evan Neal has not performed. He has not been the player that we expected him to be. And unfortunately, people say some harsh things and like not the right way, but they're also not completely untrue. So I feel for the guy. I know it's really harsh to get criticism, especially unsolicited criticism from people who don't even play the sport. But overall, Evan Neal, just as a player in itself, has got to step up to the plate a little bit more, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing. Obviously, you're frustrated, but at the same time, you also have to read the room. Like you're talking about people who come and pay hard-earned money, season ticket holders, especially. Like season tickets for the Giants are not cheap, and even today, tickets for any game is not cheap. And these people pay their hard-earned money to come and watch. They want to watch a winning product, and when you're not doing your job, the fans are within their rights to boo. It shows they care. It's when they don't make any noise and don't say anything, that's when you've kind of lost them. But they boo because they care. They'll cheer you as loud as possible when you do great things and you win and you bring back championships. They'll revere you forever in this town. Eli Manning will never have to buy another meal ever again in New York and New Jersey because of what he's done here. Same thing with Michael Strahan and Justin Tuck and all the other Giant legends who have done stuff. Sean O'Hara, beloved forever. Guys like that saying things about your fan base. This is now, unfortunately, what is going to be remembered right now in the Giant fan base is that Evan Neal not only is not playing well, and he could have just gone about and said, I'm just trying to do the best I can. And, they could have understood that. But now they're going to remember, even with this apology, which, okay, good for him. Somebody got to him, obviously. But now this is what they're going to remember for the next couple of weeks, is that he shot his mouth off and he basically kind of like looked down on the fan base. That's not a good look for somebody who is struggling. This isn't somebody like Saquon Barkley or Darren Waller, like people who are performing well, who are kind of saying this. This is somebody who is really, their job is in being questioned whether or not they can be a long-term player on this team. And this is not, unfortunately, Evan Neal has to hope this kind of blows over, because if he continues to struggle, it's going to be a backlash on him, because the fans will let him have it. These New Jersey fans, they have very long-term memories. They're going to bring signs. They're going to let him have it. And if he, allows pressures and sacks, they're going to really let him have it. So the best thing for Evan Neal to do, aside from the apology, is to step your game up. When the Giants drafted him 7th overall last year, everybody had high expectations because of what the player he was in Alabama, because he came from winning pedigree there. At one time, Evan Neal was considered to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. That's how high of expectations that everybody had when he was coming from college into the pros. And like I said, maybe he doesn't stick as a right tackle. Maybe he has to go to right guard or left guard or somewhere else. And that's another conversation for another time. But right now, the best thing for Evan Neal to do is just kind of lay low as far as talking and work on the game, because he's still very young and he still has a lot of work to get done. And yeah, he's going to have to survive some of the boos. But you know what? Some other players get booed too, and you work through it. You know, Eli Manning once got booed all in 2006, and all he did was bring back a championship the next year. So Evan Neal has to work on his game and get better and just kind of drown out the boos and try to make them into cheers for himself. Otherwise, this could be a sticking point of what is looked at as Evan Neal's very short tenure with the New York Giants.